As you know, my name is David Fennelly, and it's my great pleasure to be before the conference here today, presenting the findings of my Nuffield study titled Alternative Pasture Management to Address the Nitrates Challenge at the Root Cause. So I didn't really know whether it was an honour or an offence to be left last, but we have the whole afternoon now to ourselves to talk about water quality. So the rationale for my topic anyway has come about in the early years of my farming career. As farmers, we've been tasked with numerous environmental measures, whether that's around greenhouse gases, biodiversity restoration, and as a dairy farmer front and centre at the moment, I'd have to feel that water quality is the most significant challenge that we're faced with at the moment. So the map here on the right-hand side of this slide will be familiar to probably everyone in the room, as it outlines that 42% of Irish rivers that are at unsatisfactory levels for nitrate concentrations. Nitrogen and phosphorus being two of the most significant measures of the ecological status of our waters. And agriculture is the main source of these. And investigating this topic, it was my ambition to keep our grass-based system, our grazing dairy cow at the centre of this, and looking to the future, unearth the root cause of this challenge from our system, and identify mitigation practices that we can adopt and correct this challenge at the very beginning. So for nitrate loss to occur, there has to be two criteria available. So we need surplus nitrogen in the form of nitrate in the soil, and we need water moving down through the soil. If we don't have water movement, if our soils aren't saturated, we won't have a loss to water. So this is a diffuse pathway. Oftentimes when we think about water quality, we're talking about our farmyards and fencing off rivers and stuff like that. But we have to, when it comes to nitrate loss, we're talking about the whole agricultural landscape as a feature. The graph in the middle of this slide here outlines a typical rainfall curve for Ireland. And the two areas shaded in grey and marked as high risk are from the autumn period in August through to February every year. And this is where 80% of all nitrate loss occurs, and 50% takes place during the close period, and hence our calendar farming system, as it's known, is probably not going to go anywhere. The map here on the right-hand side here now is probably less familiar, as this is the EPA's pollution impact potential map for nitrate. And the areas coloured in red are those that have a greater likelihood for loss. It's also by no coincidence that those are the areas that have more of the intensive farming happening in Ireland. And these are the more free draining soils that can't retain nitrate in our soils, particularly in wet periods. So it's important to remember here that there's a seasonality to this loss. There's also an interannual variation from wet years to dry years, and there's also a nationwide variation, and that's also within our farms. As farmers, we're all familiar with those wet fields or the dry fields. So while we can't do anything about the weather, as farmers, we're facing climate change head on, and the soils under our management are the one natural lever, I suppose, that we can intercept both the water cycle and the nitrogen cycle. And as we're trying to address this challenge, unfortunately, our weather is becoming more disruptive at the same time. Like the winter of 2023 into this year will live long in Irish farmers' memory with the level of rainfall we received. And on average, it's seen that that level of rainfall will occur. But not only are we getting more rain, it's coming in more disruptive patterns. So, but it is possible for us as farmers to influence the function of our soils, both from an environmental point of view and a production point of view. And a couple of key parameters there would be the water holding capacity of our soils, where we can prolong our growth into dry periods, retain nitrogen in the soil for longer, and our soil organic carbon, binding more nitrogen up in the soil's reserves. And the most easy indicator of this is to get out with a spade and assess visually our soils and get used to knowing what a healthy and functioning soil looks like. In Brittany and France, I visited the farm of Florent Cotton, and Florent is both a dairy farmer and a consultant to other farmers in the area. And just a couple of simple practices that are not as commonplace on Irish farms that are delivering for this farm would be biologically treating all his slurry to have a more healthy product going out onto our soils, and the composting of all his farmyard manures. And the results are visual across his farm. In Victoria, in Australia, I visited the farm of Andrew Whiting. Now, Andrew has adopted the soil key method of establishing diverse pastures. Over the last number of years, he's altered his grazing management. And for his area in Australia, the target is to grow a ton of dry matter for every 100 mils of rain. But Andrew, year in, year out, is now outperforming that as his soils have become more resilient. Although in a drier context than ours, the same principles do apply to a certain extent. And just in this heat map here, taken in the summer from above, you'll see Andrew's farm is outlined above the line and his neighbour's farm below the line. And you can see the difference in the soil temperature and the amount of pasture that Andrew has versus neighbouring farms. So we've touched a little bit on the weather effects, the soil interaction with this challenge, and the climate effect. But when it comes to the source of that surplus nitrate in our soils, we can actually benchmark our performance in this area. And this is through a simple balance equation, and which is a new KPI to us, and that's farm nitrogen surplus. So it's a simple balance equation between all of the inputs onto a farm, like our artificial fertilizer, purchased fodder, purchased livestock, etc., and imported feed, versus all of the outputs and where nitrogen is recovered in milk, beef, livestock sales, or fodder, etc. And this is represented in kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year figure. And on average, Irish dairy farms have a surplus of nitrogen of 160 kilos. And a future target would be to try and reduce this to 100 kilos. So during my studies, I took part in a training workshop with Brendan Horan and William Burchill of Moore Park. And the lads carried out a study of a discussion group in Cork. And the top 6 performers for this, or the lowest emitters to the environment, had a nitrogen surplus of 122 kilos. And the poorer performers had a nitrogen surplus of 196 kilos. But not only did the top performers have less of an impact on the environment, they were indeed more profitable. And we can get into some of the attributes of those farms in the discussions after. While benchmarking our performance is important, we also need to put this into practice and gain this efficiency in the field. And I'll touch on a couple of practices that I came across in my travels. I met with Joel Williams, a Canadian soil and plant educator who travels the world speaking to farmers, and is a big advocate of foliar nitrogen applications to both grass and cereals. And this is basically changing from a granular applicated product to soil to a leaf applied product. And with that, and ensuring that other trace elements other than our macronutrients are right, farmers claim to get an efficiency of their applications of between 30 and 40%, allowing them to reduce their artificial fertilizers. Moving to New Zealand, I travelled with Kainan Ahu of Agronomics, and Kainan runs an agronomy service to farmers in mid-Canterbury, specialising in pasture-based dairy farmers, but spanning many enterprises. But he builds a large database of all of the soil tests, grassland performance, the whole farm performance, and overlays that with what he sees in the paddock and taking live information from each of his visits, both from visually assessing the soil and sap analysis, etc., of the grass in the paddocks. So this acts as a really strong decision support service to his clients, the farmers, and it's something that I haven't seen as much of here, particularly in a dairy farming context. And I'm sure it would have been a service that would have been of benefit to many farmers this year, being such a difficult growing season. So staying in Canterbury, I travelled to Christchurch and spent a bit of time around Lincoln, and I met there at Agricom Seeds Alistair Moorhead. So Alistair has been instrumental in the development of the Ecotane brand of variety of plantain. And why we might include Ecotane in our pastures is that It has a large impact on reducing the nitrate loss from our dairy systems, but it particularly works on the urine fraction of the nitrogen surplus. So the urine makes up 66% of all nitrogen lost from a dairy farming system. So if we're not working on that, we'll struggle to make big progress in our reductions. I've seen this put to the test at Lincoln University's research dairy farm, where they're testing new mitigation measures together, and they are delivering that reduction of 30% of nitrate loss from their soils there. Interestingly, they're also using bulk milk urea as a knowledge transfer tool. So this is information that's collected every 2 days as dairy farmers supply their milk to their co-op. And just what this outlines is that there is within the year, there is an increase in the amount of nitrogen that our cows are excreting as the season progresses. And this is actually a graph from my own farm, and you can see just highlighted with the orange bar, in the autumn time, we have a larger excretion of nitrogen from our cows. So to draw some conclusions, firstly around the pathway for nitrate loss, we have high-risk areas, as you saw from the PIP map, with free-draining soils that are more prone to nitrate loss. And this poses a big challenge around, particularly in Ireland, around farm fragmentation and around potentially increasing the loading of nitrogen on certain parts of our farm, like the milking platform, for example. Around soil structure, it's a very visual and very easy tool that we can assess the functionality of our soil, both from a production point of view, but also from a soil health function for the environment. And it's something that we can't address from the seat of the tractor. Our in-field action is really important with all of this, getting the right measure at the right time in the right place. And that's really where the rubber hits the road for all of this. We can have the greatest plans in the world on paper, but it's when farmers put their actions into place is really important. Around reducing the source of nitrate from our farms, nitrogen surplus is a key performance indicator that has a very strong correlation to what is being lost to the environment and our waters. Functional forage, so plantain and perhaps others out there, can have a big impact on reducing nitrate from our cows. It has a diuretic effect, and it also acts in the soil, reducing the transfer of ammonia to nitrate in the soil. And again, it works on the urine fraction of the certain nitrogen surplus from our farms. So some recommendations that I've drawn from this study around the pathway for nitrate loss. As a sector, we need a traffic light messaging service for nutrient applications to all farms. This would be a collaborative approach between Pasture-Based Ireland, Met Éireann, the EPA and the department, and perhaps might look something like this, if I may use the name of a former co-op in Ireland, Glanbia. We can tailor this to specific areas within co-ops' catchments, giving some brief advice around predicted growth, weather conditions, and using a simple traffic light measure between red lights and green lights and amber in between. But at the moment, artificial fertiliser or slurry, farmyard manure, they're all out of the question. And the green light for soil water, for the time of year this year, growing conditions are still quite good. It's a lower risk nutrient, and it's still possible to apply that. And we could have a link to more information and give perhaps more live information during the week. We need continual professional training, particularly around our soil observation skills and the nitrogen cycle. There's a huge technical aspect to this environmental improvement around our water quality, and farmers do need to be upskilled and upskill themselves in this area in order to understand the challenge first of all and to make some progress. Around the mitigation of the source of nitrate, we need to adopt nitrogen surplus as a new KPI in our discussion groups first of all. This is a peer-to-peer learning environment that we know is successful in improving the performance of the poor performers in the group, and it's important that we can benchmark our environmental performance at the same level as our physical and financial performance KPIs that we're already used to, like 6-week calving rate or milk solids per cow and profit per hectare, etc. We need a heightened level of agronomy to grass-based farmers in order to aid their decision-making, particularly to maintain the uptake of new technologies, such as clover and different mechanisms. In difficult growing seasons, it's very easy for farmers who are under pressure to lose heart and to revert to what they know best. But we can't afford to have that going forward. So I think we need a stronger technical advice on the ground in the paddock with farmers to make progress. Looking to the future, we need robust, data-driven and farm-specific nutrient management plan systems. We know from the Agricultural Catchments Programme there's no correlation to the influence on water quality and whole farm stocking rate as a measure. And we need further investigation and research around the nitrogen excretion from dairy cows in the autumn time, as there's surplus nitrogen in the diet, and in an extended grazing model, there's further research required around how we mitigate that. Finally, I'd just like to thank the investors of Nuffield Ireland, without whom this opportunity would not be available to the likes of myself. I'd like to thank Joe and Catherine for putting on a great programme over the last couple of years and being a great help to us all, and putting such a great conference together with the conference committee. I'd like to thank my mentor, Jonathan Teig, and Karina Pierce, who've been a great source of advice over the last couple of years. And in particular, I'd like to thank my family, my parents, Tom and Florence, and my brother Ian and Una, who have been a great help through this journey, affording me time away from the farm and also putting together my report, which is available for download on the Nuffield Ireland website. Finally, I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I look forward to our discussions to come. Thank you.